Can you spot a scam? Google has created a quiz to test your ability to spot phishing emails, and it turns out we're pretty terrible at it. Susan McLean from Cyber Safety Solution joins me now from Melbourne. Susan, thank you very much for being with us. Look, I did pretty badly on this quiz. I got to be honest, it was really bad, in fact. But am I alone here, or are we all pretty behind on where we should be?
Look, I think the reality is most people are far too trusting. I quickly did it this afternoon after your producer sent it to me, and thankfully I got 8 out of 8.
Oh, good.
So I was very glad about that. But the thing is, most people are trusting. A lot of these emails that come look so legitimate. It is very, very difficult to pick them. And I think Google needs to be commended for putting this out, and I hope as many people as possible have a crack at it.
I was really alarmed to see that apparently, on average, we get about 16 of these malicious emails per month. Is that widely understood in communities such as yours? I just had no idea.
Look, I think it depends on what you do and what access to email you have. So if you're just a private citizen at home who may occasionally use email, you will get less than if you're running a business and you're on the internet all the time. But certainly a lot of these emails, you know, will come from places that you already tend to do business with. So initially you think, oh, yes, that must actually be for me, and then your sort of common sense prevails. But I always say to people, unless you're expecting it, it's probably going to be a scam. Err on the side of caution.
Sure. We've got some examples that we'll go through in just a moment, but I suppose broadly speaking, what are some red flags that we can just kind of keep in our mind to make sure that we don't fall for what can be pretty sophisticated scams?
They can, and what I would say to people is, if you are not expecting an email from that organisation, then think, well, hang on, my account is not due, or I might go to Officeworks to shop, but I certainly don't have a trading account with them, because that was a scam that was doing the rounds just before Christmas. But certainly look at where it's come from. So let's say, for example, like I got all these Officeworks scammy emails just before Christmas with the great big Officeworks letterhead. But when you checked who had sent the email, it was someone at gmail.com. So you clearly knew that that was not coming from that organisation. Okay, well, it sounds good when you say it. A lot of people do fall for these sorts of tricks, Susan. So perhaps we could go through a couple of the examples from this test that Google's put together, and maybe we could start with the Google Doc one, which is one that I did fall for, of many. Yeah, and look, it does look very legitimate, but again, are you actually engaging in Google Docs with anyone? And most people know if, in fact, they are expecting a Google Doc to be able to open and edit or read. So again, if it's not from the person you expected, if it's not something you're expecting, don't open it. And one of the things, I suppose, that came up through the quiz is if you roll your mouse over certain things, you can see the URLs, and you need to be aware of that sort of stuff. Is that right? That is right. You can read the URLs. You can actually get into the email headers, which is not that difficult to do. You know, just Google, how do I find an email header? And that will actually give you the IP address of where it's come from. You can run the IP address through another program on the internet. Now, it won't give you the address of the person that sent it, but it will give you a location. So if, you know, for example, the Officeworks email has come from Saudi Arabia, for example, or Uzbekistan, you're going to know that that's a problem. But what we want people to do is, A, make sure that their virus protection on their devices is up to speed to start with, and that is, of course, going to limit the amount of stuff that gets through to your inbox. Right. Okay. One of the other questions was about faxes, which potentially should set off alarm bells, because I don't know who sends and receives faxes anymore. What about that one, Susan? Look, that was really interesting, because I'm with you. My goodness, faxes. But guess what? If you work in a hospital or a medical facility, you are faxing all day, every day. Right. They still primarily use fax for all their communications between doctors, referrals and things like that. I know it sounds old-fashioned and antiquated, but it happens. So again, you know, I think the fax one was quite, you know, I don't know really why it was there, because 99% of the population wouldn't have a fax machine at home, and, you know, it comes through the fax, it's a piece of paper, you know, don't believe it unless you're expecting it. It's pretty easy to deal with that one, I think.
Right, and there was one as well, Susan, about a third party wants access to your data. Is there any way for us to know if that is legitimate straight away?
Look, I always err on the side of caution for any of these. When you sign up for anything online, and it may be an app that you have chosen to download yourself, you'll often get a little prompt that says, hey, we would like to know where you are, or we would like to access this. I always say no. Like, I don't even, as a rule of thumb, give any of my apps access to any of my information, because realistically they don't need it. They want it, and that's a very different thing. So if you are training yourself to always say no to that sort of stuff, you're going to be a whole lot better. But again, it is quite tricky, and I really encourage as many people as possible to get a copy of it and do it. The other one, of course, is if you get something that you think is a little bit dodgy but you're not sure, there's the government site ScamWatch, so you can go onto that, and it has a list of all the current popular scams and emails that are going around. So you can check it there to see if it's a well-known one.
Right. And just with this quiz more broadly, Susan, does it concern you at all that Google is going down this path of education? Are they saying that they really can't protect us, and so we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves?
Look, I think all the big tech companies do a fairly good job at managing this. You've got to appreciate the sheer volume of stuff that goes through, and just how clever scammers are. Basically, they only need a 1% uptake for everything they send to be ahead, so they don't particularly care. So a lot of the back-end stuff will filter a lot of stuff out. Your own virus protection should filter other things out. But I think it's really good when companies become proactive and say, hey, you use my product, we are doing our best to try and help you, but please try to educate yourself, because no one organisation or person or entity can manage this all on its own.
Absolutely. We've got one more thing from the quiz that we wanted to take a look at, which was a pretty legitimate-looking email from Dropbox. So how can we know that that one's a scam, Susan?
Look, that was the one that I was probably more hesitant on. But again, were you expecting something from Dropbox? Do you use Dropbox? Now, if you don't, it's really easy. No, don't use it, nothing to do with me. But then again, if it is something that you use regularly, then you're going to have to be very careful about looking at where it's come from. What I found often is I access my emails on my phone. I will get my emails on my phone and quickly get rid of anything I think is dodgy before it even has a chance to wreak havoc on my computer or iPad or anything like that that I'm using, because there's less likelihood of it messing with your system on a phone than it is on a computer.
Right, so red flag if anything pops up in your email that you weren't expecting, and if an app asks you to track you in any way, you should really just default to no, right? Those are the two takeaways, big ones?
Default to no is the best. I mean, look, I get things from banks all the time, you know, click here, click there. These are banks that I don't even do business with. So, you know, clearly I know that that's a problem. But the legitimate ones, you know, I buy all my business equipment and stationery at Officeworks. The one that came before Christmas, it looked legitimate, except I know I don't have an account with Officeworks. And, of course, the email was a dead giveaway. The other one, of course, is poor grammar, spelling and punctuation.
Oh, yeah.
And anything that is addressed to dear sir, madam, or hi, how are you? Because these scammers don't necessarily know to address it to you personally. And of course, if you are getting these emails from someone you do business with, normally the salutation is going to be personal, because they know they're sending it to you.
Oh, some very valuable and useful information there. Susan McLean from Cyber Safety Solutions, thank you so much.
Thank you.